Hey everybody, it's Courtney. I'm back with another project for Not Too Shabby. Today I'm going to be using the new stamp set called Unicorn Dreamland, and I'm just going to be using these two unicorns here. So this is going to be pretty much a one-layer card. I am starting off with a piece of Nina Solar White 80-pound cardstock, and I'm just drawing some pencil lines to guide me as far as where I need to place my images. So I'm going to be stamping both of my images with blackout ink by Ink on 3, and I'm going to have one of each of the unicorns on each side of my little strip that I made there with my pencil lines. And I had previously cut out my masks from full stick Post-it notes, and I had cut out the entire mask for one and realized I don't need to mask out the top. So I was being a little lazy and just cut out the bottom portion of that second mask. But I'll go ahead and line those up. And then I'm going to take some Post-it note tape and just put that slightly above the first or the bottom pencil line, and then go ahead and erase that pencil line before I do my ink blending. I'm going to be creating a rainbow on the bottom portion of my card panel. I'm going to be using Dusty Concord, Mermaid Lagoon, Cracked Pistachio, Squeezed Lemonade, Carved Pumpkin, and Festive Berries, all Distress Oxide inks. And I have a ink blending tool for each one of my colors. And I'm going to start off, obviously, with the Festive Berries or the reddish color and kind of work my way down with all of the rainbow colors. And the first time around, I'm pretty much just putting my color down. I'm not really worried about my colors blending at this point. I just want to make sure that I have everything spaced out evenly and that I'm able to fit all 6 of my colors. Once I get to the end with the Dusty Concord, I'm going to go back in the opposite direction. And this is when I'm going to worry about actually blending my colors. So I have that Dusty Concord down, and then I'll pick up my ink blending tool for the Mermaid Lagoon and kind of go over those areas. Sometimes I'm putting a little bit more ink on the ink blending tool, and other times I'm not. I'm just using whatever's there. With the Squeezed Lemonade, I probably picked too light of a yellow. I was having a hard time blending that with the Cracked Pistachio and the Carved Pumpkin. I probably should have used like a fossilized amber. And I probably would have had better luck. You can see I have a huge smudge there in the top left-hand corner, but I'll show you how we will fix that. But once I was happy with the blending, or the blending was as best as I was going to get it with that Squeezed Lemonade, I'm going to go ahead and remove my Post-it note tape. And you'll just want to make sure that you're careful with this too, because this can get your fingers even inkier and you can leave even more fingerprints than I already have. So first I'm going to take my sand eraser and I'm lightly going over this area to try to get some of those smudges off. I was able to get the more faint ones off, but that one big huge blob there in the top left, I wasn't able to completely remove. But I'm not going to start over. I'm going to keep going and we'll worry about fixing that later. Sometimes I just go back to those mistakes after I kind of get the card together. I'll figure out what I want to do with it at that point. So I'm going to erase the rest of my pencil lines that are under or over my images. And I'm taking my black Copic marker, and you don't necessarily need to use a Copic marker for this, but I'm just going to fill in that gap between where my first pencil line is, or in this case, where the ink blending stops, and where that second pencil line is. Normally, you'd have to erase all of your pencil lines before going in with your Copic markers, but being I'm using a black marker, I really wasn't too concerned about it. And I'm doing the best I can as far as going straight along that line, but I know even if I'm tracing a straight line, I can't draw a straight line. So I'm basically just getting the area filled in at this point, and then I'm going to bring back my T-square ruler and kind of straighten out that top and the bottom line to make sure that it's not all blobby like it was in the beginning. So once that was done, we are going to move on to the Copic coloring. And like I said, you'll want to make sure that you erase all of those pencil lines. I did notice that I missed a little piece there on the right unicorn's little nose. So you'll just want to make sure that they're completely gone. Once you get those Copic markers down, you're not going to get any of the pencil lines back up. I did go over with a Copic Safe pen this one little area that I didn't get a great impression with my stamp, and that was totally my fault. I just wasn't careful when I stamped it. So my unicorns themselves, I want them to be white, kind of, but I am putting in some shading. So I'm starting off with the C5, and I'm just going over the areas that would be the darkest. So it's mainly going to be underneath their hair and underneath their faces, where their heads are kind of over their bodies, where their back legs are kind of bent. And for this one, her tail would also be casting a shadow on her body, and just on the base part of their little ears. Going in with the C3, and I'm just going to extend those areas out a little bit further, including just a few little flick lines on their ears. And finally, I'll go in with the C1, and this is where I'm going to start flicking my color out. And the way I do this, I'm still leaving white, but I'm kind of pushing that color out. Not really, but that's kind of the motion that I'm using. I'm starting right over where I laid that C5 down, and I'm just pushing that color out. In order to get rid of those flick lines, because I don't want to see those, I want a seamless blend, I am going to use my colorless blender to just quickly go over the white areas and kind of work my way to where I placed the gray markers, or the gray color, to get rid of those flick lines. So for their hair and tails, I'm using a variety of color combinations here, and I'm only using a 2-color blend on each little section of their hair and tail, but I did want them to be rainbow to match the ink blending. So I picked out some Copic markers that somewhat matched the colors that I used of the Distress Oxides. I'll lay down my lightest color first, and then I'll just add a little bit of shading with my darkest color, and then go back in with that lightest color to blend that out. You'll see that for this entire thing, I'm only using 2 colors, but they're not all that similar. I'm trying to pick 2 colors that have quite a bit of difference so that you can actually see the shading. Whenever you're using only a 2-color blend, you want to make sure that there is a variation in color. There's markers that are very, very close together. And for my oranges, I ended up picking ones that were a little bit too close. But for example, when you get to the red, you'll see that I use an R32 and an R35. And the R35 is definitely red. The R32 is more of a pink, so that I can have a clear shadow and a clear highlight. Being you're only using 2 colors, you want to make sure that you do have those 2 colors that are far enough away on the spectrum so that you get that contrast. So I'm trying to pay attention to what color is underneath the area that I'm working on, especially on their tails, so that I don't put the purple where the purple Distress Oxide is and the red or orange where the red or orange Distress Oxide is, just so that it doesn't blend in too much. Even though I do have that bold black outline to kind of break it up, I am trying to avoid that a little bit. And honestly, I didn't plan this out. I'm kind of just randomly putting my colors down, and just hoped that I had enough strands of hair and pieces of their little tails to fit all 6 of my colors, or all 6 of my color combinations, which I lucked out, and I did. So once I had all of their hair and their tails done, they have little stars on their bodies there, and I'm just going to use a Y marker, and you can color this any color you want, but I didn't do any shading for this at all. I just colored this in solid with one of my Y markers. Keep in mind that those gray markers that we used in the beginning for their bodies, that's already going to create some shading, so you don't need to shade everything once you've already shaded that larger area. So for their little unicorn, are they horns? I don't know what they would be considered. And their little hooves there, I'm going to be using some W markers just to kind of break that up so it's not the same as the rest of their bodies. And just doing a little bit of shading with just a 2 or a 3 color blend. So once that was all done, you can still see I have my smudge there. So I'm going to go ahead and trim down my panel. Originally, this is cut down to 5 1/4 by 5 1/2 by 5 let me try that again. 5 1/2 by 4 1/4, and I trimmed it down to 5 1/4 by 4. So it's just 1/8 of an inch on each side, smaller than a card base. So I tried the sand eraser again and it's still there. So I continue to move on. I'm going to go ahead and take that EK Success journaling pen and I'm going to draw a straight line a little bit above that black strip that we colored just to kind of break up that area a little bit. And then I'm going to go ahead and stamp out one of the sentiments from the stamp set, and I'm going to be using VersaFine Onyx Black ink. This is a pigment ink, so you will want to make sure that you let this dry for just a minute or two. It's a pretty fast drying pigment ink, but it is a pigment ink. So it will give you a bold black image and a very crisp image, but it will take a minute or two to dry. So next I took a piece of fun foam that's cut down to just slightly smaller than my card panel. I'm using my ATG gun for this, and I always put some of that in the center as well so I don't get a bubble. Sometimes when you use fun foam, if you don't put any adhesive in the center, you end up with kind of a bubble in the middle of your card panel. So always put a little bit of adhesive in the center as well. I'm going to go ahead and pop that onto an A2 size white note card. And this is where I need to go ahead and fix everything. First, I added some sparkle with a Nuvo Aqua Shimmer pen to their hair and their tails. And then I took a white gel pen and I kind of went over the area where I had my smudge. And I know it's hard to see on camera, but it's very, very noticeable in real life. And I'm just putting down some of that white ink and smearing it with my finger. And this toned it down a lot. It didn't completely get rid of it, but it certainly toned it down. So I took some Nuvo drops, and this is the White Blizzard, it's glitter drops, and I kind of cascaded those down on either side, one right over that smudge to make it less noticeable. But that is the card for today, guys. Thanks a lot for stopping by. Have a great day. Bye.